April 1941. The Wehrmacht made one critical assumption. Modern fortifications cannot hold against combined arms warfare. They had proven this assumption in Poland. The supposedly impregnable fortresses along the Polish border fell in hours. Artillery reduced concrete to rubble. Dive bombers cracked steel cupolas like eggshells. Infantry mopped up what remained. The lesson was clear. Static defenses belonged to the last war. They had proven it again in France. The Maginot Line, the most sophisticated fortification system ever built, was either bypassed or neutralized. When German forces finally assaulted Maginot Forts directly, they fell within days. The French had spent billions on concrete and steel. It bought them nothing. By April 1941, Wehrmacht doctrine treated fortifications as speed bumps. The playbook was simple. Locate the fort, suppress it with artillery and air power, assault with infantry and engineers, reduce it in hours. Maybe a day if the garrison was stubborn. 2 days maximum if resupply was impossible. The numbers supported this assumption. In Poland, Fort Modlin, defended by up to 40,000 troops at its peak, fell after 16 days of siege. In Belgium, Fort Eben Emael, considered the strongest fortress in Europe, fell in approximately 30 hours to 493 German airborne troops using shaped charges. In France, the Maginot Line fort at Schönenberg withstood direct assault, but capitulated when France surrendered. The pattern was undeniable. Modern warfare had evolved beyond static defense. Mobility, combined arms, and overwhelming firepower rendered fortifications obsolete. A fort could delay, it could inflict casualties, it could buy time, but it could not hold indefinitely. Not against the Wehrmacht. The German General Staff had calculated the timeline for Operation Marita, the invasion of Greece, with precision. Northern Greek border fortifications, collectively known as the Metaxas Line, would fall within 48 hours, maybe 72, if weather interfered with Luftwaffe support. The timeline allocated 2 days for the entire fortified zone to collapse. This was not arrogance. This was math. The Wehrmacht brought 5 divisions to the Bulgarian-Greek border. The Metaxas Line was defended by isolated garrison forts with no mutual support, no air cover, no armor, and no realistic possibility of reinforcement or resupply once the battle began. The garrisons would fight bravely, exhaust their ammunition, and surrender. That was the pattern. That was the rule. But on April 6, 1941, in a concrete fort embedded in a mountainside near the Bulgarian border, a Greek lieutenant colonel named Georgios Douratsos decided that some rules exist to be broken. Georgios Douratsos is 47 years old when the Wehrmacht crosses the Bulgarian border. Born in 1894, he is a career officer who has spent decades studying fortification warfare. He commands Fort Roupel, one of 21 forts along the Metaxas Line, stretching from the Yugoslav border to the Aegean Sea. His garrison numbers approximately 1,000 officers and men. They are artillerymen, machine gunners, engineers, not front-line infantry, not elite troops. Reservists and professionals mixed together, assigned to a fort that was never supposed to face a real war. Fort Roupel sits on a ridge overlooking the Strymon River Valley. It controls the main road from Bulgaria into Greek Macedonia. The fort itself is a masterpiece of interwar engineering, built into solid rock, reinforced with meters of concrete, armed with artillery turrets and machine gun positions that command every approach. Underground tunnels connect firing positions to ammunition magazines, barracks, command posts, infirmaries. The fort has its own power generators, water supply, ventilation systems. It was designed to be self-sufficient for weeks. But it was also designed under a specific assumption. The fort would be part of a continuous defensive line, supported by mobile reserves, covered by air power, reinforced when necessary. Strip away those assumptions, and Fort Roupel becomes an isolated concrete bunker surrounded by an army that has crushed every fortification it has ever encountered. Douratsos knows this. He studied in French military academies. He knows what happened to the Maginot Line. He has read the after-action reports from Poland and Belgium. He understands exactly how Wehrmacht combined arms doctrine dismantles static defenses. Artillery suppresses the defenders. Stukas crater the approaches and collapse observation posts. Engineers with flamethrowers and demolition charges reduce strong points one by one. And when ammunition runs low and resupply is impossible, the garrison surrenders because continuing to fight serves no military purpose. The strategic picture is bleak. Greece has been at war with Italy since October 1940. The Greek army, undermanned, under-equipped, exhausted, has been fighting in the mountains of Albania for 6 months. They have stopped the Italian invasion. They have even pushed Mussolini's forces back into Albania. It is the first Allied land victory of World War II. But victory against Italy has cost Greece everything. The army is deployed on the Albanian front. There are no strategic reserves. The best divisions, the heavy equipment, the limited air power, all committed against Italy. When Hitler decides to invade Yugoslavia and Greece simultaneously to secure his southern flank before Barbarossa, Greece has almost nothing left to defend the Bulgarian border. The Metaxas Line is the only defensive barrier, and the Metaxas Line is a thin string of isolated forts with no mobile reserves behind them, no air cover above them, and no expectation that they can hold for more than a day or two. Douratsos receives his orders on April 5, 1941. They are simple. Delay the German advance as long as possible. Inflict maximum casualties. Buy time for the main Greek army to reposition. The orders do not specify how long as possible means. They do not promise reinforcement. They do not outline an extraction plan. Douratsos understands what this means. Fort Roupel will fight alone. It will run out of ammunition, and when the ammunition is gone, the fort will fall. The only variables are how long it takes and how many Germans die in the process. He assembles his garrison in the main tunnel on the evening of April 5th. He tells them the truth. The Wehrmacht is coming. No one is coming to help them. Their job is to hold as long as they can. Some of the men are reservists in their 40s. Some are 19 years old. All of them understand what they are being asked to do. April 6th, 1941, 5:15 a.m. The Wehrmacht crosses the Bulgarian border. 5 divisions, artillery, armor, air support. The 72nd Infantry Division advances directly toward Fort Roupel. German intelligence estimates the fort will fall by nightfall. Maybe sooner if the Luftwaffe can crater the gun positions early. Douratsos watches the German columns through a stereoscopic rangefinder in the fort's main observation post. He can see the dust rising from the roads. He can see the motorcycle reconnaissance units probing ahead. He can see the long columns of trucks and half-tracks carrying infantry. He does not open fire. Not yet. The Germans are still out of range. Let them come closer. Let them think the fort is abandoned, or that the garrison has already fled. Let them come close enough that every shot counts. At 6:42 a.m., German forward elements reach the base of the ridge. They are 2,800 meters from Fort Roupel's primary gun positions. Close enough. Douratsos gives the order. Every artillery piece, every machine gun, every weapon in the fort opens fire simultaneously. The first German soldiers to die at Fort Roupel are motorcycle scouts from a reconnaissance platoon. They are riding two abreast on the main road when the fort's machine guns open up from positions they cannot see. The road becomes a kill zone. 7 men die in the first 10 seconds. The German column stops. Troops dismount. Officers shout orders. The Wehrmacht has walked into a prepared defensive position, and the initial shock is brutal. Machine gun fire rakes the valley from multiple overlapping positions. Mortar rounds begin dropping on the road. The Germans take cover behind vehicles, in ditches, anywhere that offers concealment. But the Wehrmacht does not panic. This is what they trained for. Within minutes, German artillery observers are calling in fire missions. Heavy guns deployed 5 kilometers behind the front begin ranging shots on Fort Roupel's known positions. The first German artillery shells hit at 7:18 a.m. They are targeting the fort's external observation posts and the exposed machine gun bunkers on the approaches. The shells are 150 millimeters, designed to crack concrete. The bombardment is methodical. German artillery doctrine calls for sustained preparatory fires to suppress defenders before infantry assault. The guns will fire until the observation posts are destroyed and the Greeks stop shooting back. Inside Fort Roupel, the bombardment sounds like the mountain itself is being torn apart. Shells slam into rock and concrete. Shrapnel ricochets through the tunnels. Dust fills the air. The electric lights flicker. Men press their hands over their ears, but it does not help. The noise is inside your skull, inside your chest. You feel each impact as much as hear it. Douratsos moves through the tunnels, checking each position. The main artillery turrets are deep inside solid rock. The German shells cannot touch them. The observation posts are reinforced with meters of concrete. They can take punishment. But the external machine gun positions are vulnerable. One by one, German shells crater the approaches and collapse firing slits. Douratsos pulls men back from positions that are no longer tenable and redirects them to reserve firing points deeper in the fort. At 9:30 a.m., the German artillery shifts targets. Instead of hitting the fort directly, they begin dropping shells on the road behind it, cutting off any possible retreat or reinforcement. The message is clear. Fort Roupel is surrounded. Surrender now or die when the assault comes. Douratsos does not respond. He does not send emissaries. He does not raise a white flag. The fort's guns continue firing. At 10:15 a.m., German infantry begins probing the fort's perimeter. They advance in small groups using cover. Rocks, dead ground, smoke from the artillery barrage. They are looking for weak points, gaps in the defensive fire, places where engineers can move forward with demolition charges. The Greeks meet them with interlocking machine gun fire from positions the Germans cannot see. The first assault wave loses 23 men in the first 100 meters. They pull back. The Wehrmacht does not waste soldiers on futile frontal assaults. If the approaches are covered by fire, you suppress the fire, then you advance. That is the doctrine. At 11:40 a.m., the Luftwaffe arrives. Stuka dive bombers, Ju-87s with their distinctive inverted gull wings and screaming sirens. There are 6 of them. They circle the fort looking for targets. The artillery turrets are too small and too well protected to hit with bombs. But the observation posts are visible. The Stukas peel off one by one, diving at steep angles, releasing 250-kilogram bombs at low altitude. The bombs hit with devastating force. One direct hit collapses an observation post, burying 3 men under tons of concrete and rock. Another bomb craters the main approach road, cutting the fort off completely. The Stukas climb, circle, dive again. This time they use their forward-firing machine guns to strafe any external position still showing signs of life. Inside the fort, Douratsos makes a decision. The external positions are being destroyed one by one. Keeping men in those positions is wasting lives for no gain. He orders a full withdrawal to the interior defensive line. Every man pulls back into the tunnels. The heavy steel doors are sealed. From this point forward, Fort Roupel fights from inside the mountain. The Germans observe the withdrawal. To them, it looks like the garrison is collapsing. German commanders assume the fort is on the verge of surrender. At 2:30 p.m., a German officer approaches the fort under a white flag. He carries a written surrender demand. The message is simple. You have fought well. Further resistance is pointless. Surrender now, and your men will be treated as prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention. Douratsos reads the message. He writes a reply. His response is direct. Fortresses do not surrender. They are taken. The German officer returns to his lines. The Wehrmacht prepares for a direct assault. At 4 p.m., German combat engineers move forward with flamethrowers and satchel charges. Their objective is to reach the fort's main entrance tunnel and collapse it with demolitions, sealing the garrison inside. If they cannot take the fort by assault, they will bury it. But the entrance tunnel is a killing ground. It is a narrow approach, overlooked by multiple firing positions. Machine guns open up from slits the engineers cannot see. The first 4 men die before they get within 50 meters. The engineers try using smoke for cover. The Greeks fire blindly into the smoke. At this range, they do not need to see targets. They know where the approach is. They sweep it with continuous fire. The assault fails. The Germans lose 9 men. They do not try again that day. April 6th ends with Fort Roupel still fighting. The German timetable called for the fort to fall by nightfall. It has not. Douratsos conducts ammunition inventory. They have expended 40% of their machine gun ammunition and 60% of their artillery shells. At this rate, they have enough for 2 more days, maybe 3 if they ration carefully. April 7th. The German assault resumes at dawn. This time they bring heavier artillery, 210mm howitzers capable of cracking any fortification. The shells are massive. Each one weighs 135 kilograms. When they hit, entire sections of the fort's external structure disintegrate. The Greeks pull back deeper into the tunnels. The Luftwaffe returns. This time they bring larger bombs, 500-kilogram penetrators designed to collapse bunkers. One bomb scores a near-direct hit on the main ventilation shaft. The explosion sends a shockwave through the entire tunnel system. Lights go out. Men are thrown off their feet. For a moment, Douratsos thinks the fort's structure has failed, that the mountain itself is collapsing on top of them. But the main structure holds. The fort was built into solid granite. The tunnels are reinforced with steel and concrete. The mountain absorbs the punishment. German infantry tries another assault at midday. This time, they use flamethrowers to clear the approaches. Jets of burning fuel spray across the hillside. The Greeks cannot hold the external positions under sustained flamethrower attack. They abandon the outermost bunkers and fall back to the next defensive line. The Germans advance 50 meters. Then the Greeks open fire from new positions deeper in the fort. The German advance stops. They have gained ground, but they have not breached the fort, and every meter costs blood. April 7th ends with Fort Roupel still fighting. 2 days. The fort was supposed to fall in less than one. April 8th. German commanders change tactics. If direct assault is too costly, they will isolate the fort completely and wait for the garrison to run out of supplies. Heavy artillery pounds the fort throughout the day, not to destroy it, but to keep the defenders suppressed and demoralized. German infantry establishes a tight cordon around the entire ridge. No one gets in. No one gets out. Douratsos conducts another inventory. Ammunition is critical. Food and water can be rationed. Medicine is running low. They have wounded men and limited supplies to treat them. But the ammunition problem is acute. They have enough for one more day of sustained combat. After that, they will be reduced to rifles and grenades. But Douratsos does not order surrender. Not yet. The fort is still intact. The Germans have not breached the interior. As long as the fort can fight, it will fight. April 9th. The German assault intensifies. They know the fort must be running low on ammunition. They probe every approach simultaneously, forcing the Greeks to expend rounds, defending multiple positions. German artillery fires continuously. The Luftwaffe drops bombs every hour. The goal is attrition. Bleed the fort dry and force surrender. Inside Fort Roupel, ammunition discipline is absolute. Every shot is controlled. No suppressive fire. No harassment. Only direct fire at confirmed targets. Machine gunners are limited to 3-round bursts. Artillery crews fire only when German infantry actually assaults, not during preparatory bombardments. The Germans advance again. This time they reach the outer defensive perimeter. Engineers place demolition charges on steel doors. The explosions collapse 2 entrance tunnels. The Germans are getting closer, but they are not inside yet, and the Greeks are still shooting. This is the kind of history that gets forgotten, not because it doesn't matter, but because nobody's telling it. If you believe these stories deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe and like button. Every subscriber helps us keep rescuing these moments from obscurity. April 10th, 4 days. Fort Roupel has held for 4 days. The German timetable is shattered. The entire invasion of Greece has been delayed because one fort refuses to surrender. German commanders are furious. This is not how the script is supposed to go. Fortifications fall. That is the rule. That is what always happens. But Fort Roupel is still shooting back. Inside the fort, conditions are desperate. Ammunition is nearly gone. The artillery has 11 shells remaining. Machine guns are down to their last crates. Food is scarce. Water is rationed to 1 canteen per day. The wounded are lying on makeshift cots in the command tunnel because the infirmary was collapsed by a bomb. Douratsos knows the end is coming, not because the Germans are about to break through, but because there is nothing left to fight with. At 11:30 a.m., a radio message reaches Fort Roupel from Greek High Command. The message is brief. The Greek government has surrendered to Germany. All Greek forces are ordered to cease resistance and lay down arms. The war is over. Douratsos gathers his officers in the command post. He reads the message aloud. Then he asks for opinions. Should they obey? Should they continue fighting, even though Greece has surrendered? The vote is unanimous. They will obey. They have fought for 4 days with no support, no reinforcements, no supplies. They have done what they were asked to do. They have delayed the Wehrmacht. They have proven that Greek soldiers do not run. But they will not ignore a direct order from their own government. At 3 p.m. on April 10th, 1941, Lieutenant Colonel Georgios Douratsos walks out of Fort Roupel carrying a white flag. He is accompanied by 2 officers. They walk down the cratered road toward the German lines. A German colonel meets them halfway. He speaks French. Douratsos speaks French. The colonel asks if the garrison is ready to surrender. Douratsos says yes, but he has conditions. The garrison will surrender with full military honors. They will march out in formation carrying their weapons. They will lay down their arms only after they have left the fort. The wounded will be treated immediately. The dead will be buried with proper ceremony, and every man will be treated as a prisoner of war under the Geneva Convention, not as a criminal. The German colonel agrees to all conditions. He has been attacking this fort for 4 days. He has lost over 200 men trying to take it. He understands what Douratsos and his garrison have done. This is not a defeated enemy surrendering in shame. This is a garrison that has fought to the end of its strength and earned the right to walk out with dignity. At 5 p.m., the gates of Fort Roupel open. Approximately 1,000 Greek soldiers march out in formation. They are exhausted. They are filthy. Many are wounded, but they march in step. They carry their rifles. Their officers carry swords. They form up outside the fort and stand at attention. Only then do they lay down their weapons. German soldiers line the road, watching. Some of them salute. This is not victory. This is acknowledgement. The Greeks did not break. They did not run. They held a position that should have fallen in hours, and they held it for 4 days against everything the Wehrmacht could throw at them. One German officer approaches Douratsos after the surrender. He asks, in broken Greek, how many men were inside the fort. Douratsos tells him approximately 1,000 men. The German officer stares. His division has been attacking this fort with thousands of men, supported by artillery and air power, for 4 days, and the garrison held. He salutes Douratsos. Then he walks away, shaking his head. What the Germans did not know, what they could not have known during the battle, was that Fort Roupel was not an isolated anomaly. Across the Metaxas Line, every fort held far longer than German planning assumed. Fort Echinos held for 4 days. Fort Istibe held for 3. Fort Palaiouriones fought until the general Greek surrender. Not a single fort on the Metaxas Line fell to direct assault. The operational consequences were immediate. The invasion of Greece, Operation Marita, was supposed to take 3 weeks. It took 5. The Wehrmacht was delayed not by Greek mobile forces or by strategic counterattacks, but by isolated fort garrisons that refused to collapse on schedule. This delay had strategic implications far beyond Greece. Operation Marita was a prerequisite for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Hitler could not invade Russia while his southern flank was unstable. He needed Greece and Yugoslavia subdued first. The original timetable called for Barbarossa to begin in mid-May 1941. The delays in Greece pushed the launch date back to June 22nd. 5 weeks. That is how much time the Metaxas Line forts bought. In December 1941, the Wehrmacht reached the outskirts of Moscow and stalled. Winter arrived. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees Celsius. German supply lines collapsed. Soldiers froze to death in summer uniforms because the Quartermaster Corps had planned for a quick summer campaign. The Blitzkrieg failed. The Eastern Front became a grinding war of attrition that Germany could not win. Historians still debate how much those 5 weeks mattered. If Barbarossa had launched in mid-May instead of late June, would the Wehrmacht have taken Moscow before winter? Would the entire course of World War II have changed? There is no way to know for certain. But this much is undeniable. Hitler expected Greece to fall in days. Instead, It took weeks, and the reason it took weeks was forts like Roupel, defended by garrisons like Douratsos' 1,000 men, who held far longer than anyone thought possible. The German army conducted after-action analysis on the Metaxas Line campaign. The reports are candid about the problems encountered. German commanders expected prepared defenses. They expected resistance, but they did not expect fortress garrisons to fight with such tenacity when defeat was inevitable. One Wehrmacht divisional report noted, "The Greek soldier fights with extraordinary courage and discipline even in hopeless situations. Fortifications that should have fallen in hours required days of sustained assault. Casualties were heavier than anticipated." Another report was more blunt. "Static defenses held by determined defenders remain a significant obstacle to rapid operations, even with air and artillery superiority. The assumption that fortifications can be quickly suppressed and reduced was proven incorrect in the Greek campaign." In other words, the rule was wrong. Fortifications can hold, if the men inside them refuse to quit. This lesson was not lost on the Allies. When British and American planners designed the D-Day defenses, they studied the Metaxas Line. They noted how small garrisons in well-built positions held off superior forces for days. They applied those lessons to the Atlantic Wall fortifications, to the Gothic Line in Italy, to the Siegfried Line in Germany. The myth of invincible blitzkrieg died on the Metaxas Line. It died in a dozen other places too: Stalingrad, Normandy, Bastogne. But Greece was first. Greece proved that static defense, when executed correctly and manned by soldiers who refuse to surrender, can stop even the Wehrmacht. And Fort Roupel was the symbol of that proof. Lieutenant Colonel Georgios Douratsos survived the war. He was held as a prisoner of war in Germany until 1945. He returned to Greece after liberation. He never spoke much about Fort Roupel. The men who served under him remembered him as calm, competent, and utterly unshakable under pressure. They remembered that he never asked them to do anything he would not do himself. And they remembered that he walked out of that fort last, after every one of his men was safely outside. Of the approximately 1,000 men who defended Fort Roupel, 143 were killed during the four-day battle. Many more were wounded. The rest survived and became prisoners of war. After the war, they scattered, returning to villages and cities across Greece, resuming the lives that had been interrupted by war. Some of them stayed in contact. Veterans organizations held reunions. They met at Fort Roupel on the anniversary of the battle. They told stories. They honored the 143 who did not come home. Fort Roupel itself remains. It stands on the same ridge overlooking the Strymon Valley. The Greek government restored it in the 1980s and opened it as a museum. You can walk through the tunnels today. You can see the artillery turrets, the machine gun positions, the command post where Douratsos made his decisions. You can stand in the observation post and look out over the valley where the Wehrmacht assembled for the assault. The walls still bear scars from German shells. There are craters on the hillside from Luftwaffe bombs. The steel doors that the engineers tried to demolish with satchel charges are still there, bent and blackened, but intact. Every April 6th, Greek veterans and active duty soldiers gather at Fort Roupel for a memorial ceremony. They read the names of the 143 who died. They lay wreaths. They stand at attention while a bugler plays taps, and they remember what 1,000 men did when the world assumed they would collapse in hours. This story matters now because it reminds us that numbers do not tell the whole story. The Wehrmacht had more troops, more guns, more bombs. They had the most advanced military in the world. They had conquered Poland and France. They were unstoppable, except they were not. Because 1,000 Greek soldiers in a concrete fort decided that the rule, the assumption that fortifications cannot hold, did not apply to them. Courage is not refusing to feel fear. Courage is feeling fear and choosing to stand anyway. Douratsos and his men were not fearless. They knew exactly what they were facing. They knew they would eventually run out of ammunition. They knew reinforcements were not coming. They knew defeat was inevitable. But they also knew their job: delay the Wehrmacht, buy time, make the Germans pay for every meter. And they did that job for 4 days, when the timetable allowed for less than one. That is the story. That is what happened on a ridge in northern Greece in April 1941. That is why Germany was stunned when one Greek fort held off the entire Wehrmacht. Because some rules are not rules at all. They are assumptions, and assumptions shatter when determined people decide they will not bend. Every like on this video keeps this story alive for the next generation. If it moved you, click it. Stories like this don't survive on their own. Someone has to pull them from the archives, verify every detail, and make sure they're never forgotten. If you want more of that work, subscribe. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below. If you've got Greek heritage, tell us, did your family ever share stories from this era? Thank you for giving Lieutenant Colonel Georgios Douratsos and the 1,000 men who served at Fort Roupel the recognition they earned. They fought when the world needed them. You remembered when it mattered most.